Hello, everyone, and welcome to MentorTalks. I'm Maria Iliadis, and today I'll be your host from the Office of Alumni Affairs in the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. MentorTalks is the chance for you to connect with exchange alumni leaders, hear their stories, and get career advice. Like today, in honor of the 2024 Olympic and Paralympic Games, we have a very special guest. Kwan is the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the United States to Belize. But this is not the first time she has represented the United States abroad. The ambassador is best known as the most decorated figure skater in U.S. history and has won 43 championships, which include 5 world championships, 9 national titles, and 2 Olympic medals. Of course, that's not all. The ambassador's experience with public diplomacy and sports goes back to her service as the first public diplomacy envoy in 2006, her work in the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, and her work in the State Department as a senior advisor. It is my honor and privilege to introduce her today on their show. Ambassador Kwan, welcome to MentorTalks. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is really the best of both worlds. My work at the embassy here in Belmopan in Belize, but also ECA, my old stomping ground when I was serving as senior advisor at Education and Cultural Affairs. So, and then talking about sports as well. I mean, it's wonderful to be here with you.
Thank you. We're so excited. So to get started, your career has spanned 2 areas, both in sports and in diplomacy.
Right.
What is it like being the U.S. ambassador to Belize? And how did you make that transition from being an athlete to serving in the U.S. government?
Well, I think for everybody who has been through a transition, it is very difficult. When I finished skating in 2006, I sort of had to rethink sort of my day-to-day, really, because I remember in 2006, I'm like, I can't imagine a day where I leave the house without bringing and hauling my ice skates. And it was sort of, I think, difficult for all athletes, professional athletes. And, I think Michael Phelps and other athletes have talked about the challenges. It's really of identity of who you are. And I was known to be a figure skater. And then to start in this new path was full of uncertainties and fear. And the one thing I did was immerse myself in school. I said the best place and the safe space is actually going to college and figuring out my voice. And I had such a wonderful time. But then I found myself also being appointed as the first public diplomacy envoy, traveling on behalf of the Department of State. And that is where I was connecting with youth and talking about educational and social issues, a lot of what ECA does, traveling under the umbrella of Special Sports United. And that is where I really had fell in love, if you will, with diplomacy and the work that was being conducted by all the FSOs, the Foreign Service Officers and diplomats abroad, and using education and using sports as a way to connect. And that is sort of how it all started. And really, I don't really look back after that. So it's really helped prepare me as I serve as the U.S. ambassador here, understanding PD, understanding the power of people-to-people connections, and the work that my colleagues at the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs do every single day.
We're definitely very excited to talk to you today because you worked at our bureau, and we have a lot of respect for all of the work that you do because you know how to do it on the ground. And I do want to turn back to your time as a public diplomacy envoy. So what was that like? What exactly did you do? And what lessons did you take from that?
Yes, so I traveled to many countries, actually. China was the first. I actually traveled with Under Secretary Karen Hughes, then went to Korea, Argentina, Russia, Ukraine, Singapore. I know I'm forgetting a couple others, but it was just an eye-opening experience, to be honest. I had incredible officers that were planning my trip and engaging in on the ground and seeing firsthand what the embassy on the ground was doing and facing. And of course, they were very different from post to post, but really engaging. And at the time, I guess, when I first was appointed as an envoy, I was like, what does public diplomacy mean? And so at the same time, I was going to grad school, no, undergrad, and then it spurred my interest to continue my education, and it sort of shaped the direction that I wanted to go in. And I had no plans, by the way. I do say that at one point I did consider joining the Foreign Service. So in a way, being a political appointee, I sort of joined the Foreign Service in a different route, but I just fell in love, and I had such admiration and respect for the diplomats that continue to serve our country all over the world. It isn't easy work, and I felt very lucky and very fortunate to get a glimpse of it when I was traveling as an envoy, to experience it firsthand, to understand. I had a perspective because we were coordinating with Main State and Sports United and at EECA, and then also when I arrived at Post, really getting a chance to engage. So it really gave me a interesting perspective, a firsthand sort of internship, if you will, to the work that is done every day.
It sounds like it gave you a real insight into the life of a diplomat.
Yes,
before
and
actually
I can say,
right?
and I can say that my degrees in IR and when applying for grad school, I had a better sense of my interests, and interest in foreign policy, interest in diplomacy, and I could say that my diploma is going to good use.
I think a lot of us can't say that, so that's an incredible. That reminds me of another question I want to ask, which is, it sounds like you were very open the whole time, both
Right.
to finding a new path after not being able to imagine doing other than that every day, going to skate. So how do you recommend that other people who are starting out find their purpose?
Well, that's a very good question. And if I ever write a book on it, I would definitely have a number of people that I would ask, because, transition isn't new to a lot of people. But I think this day and age, with the economy, with everything, you have to be flexible. I mean, I would say in my parents, in the 70s, perhaps you can be one particular thing and stay in your lane and be a lawyer, or and do that for the rest of your life until you retire. I think being nimble and flexible is something that is very important. I think when I was a figure skater, I learned so much about life lessons that it taught me, of hard work, determination, everything that you see, competing in the highest level, but also teamwork. I performed and competed under, as an individual sport, but I had such a large team, to be honest. I had a choreographer, I had a trainer, I had a coach, I had the U.S. figure skating, I had, and then I was, a spokesperson for certain companies, and so it was a team. It was a collective effort with the same goal of excelling and succeeding in sports. But transitioning, that sort of uncertainty that I was referring to is sort of scary. It's scary, and you have to have courage. You have to believe in yourself. And the one thing I realized is that I wasn't starting new. I wasn't starting from zero. In some cases, I was, because when I was training all those years on the ice, my fellow colleague students at grad school, they were in the library, they were studying, they were excelling, and I just didn't have that foundation. But I think my mindset was, okay, I'm not starting from new. How I applied myself in sports, I can apply to succeed elsewhere, including grad school, including everywhere else. So that kind of changed my mindset drastically. And then also discovering, I love, a part of me is addicted to that that unknown, that uncertainty, because that's when your growth really, that's when you grow as a person. That's when things that you don't know, you start to learn more about, and that is sort of, I'm a student of life, and I think that's a great thing, because you have to make sure that you're willing, you're open, like your question, being open to ideas, open to change, open to getting better. And I am certainly continuously learning of my management style, my leadership style, as the ambassador and head of mission, of, as they say, chief of mission. And I take that role and responsibility very seriously.
Yeah, I can see how learning is a huge part of the path that you've had. And I know that it's also not among the things that you do as ambassador. One of the things you've started, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is also new to you, which is a podcast.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not an expert podcaster. I don't know if that's the term, but yeah, we with the help of the public affairs officer, we started a podcast. I have to give props to Luke Martin here at Post, because it was his idea, his passion, and we got it up and running. We have a podcast called Palm Side Chat, and it focuses on really important issues. We started off with diplomacy, and we had the Prime Minister, John Briceño of Belize, paired with the one and only Secretary Condoleezza Rice. And then we had one on the economy, the Minister of Economy. Here, Minister Coy was part of this conversation. So there's an American and then a Belizean represented in each podcast. And it's been so much fun. It's a great way to, spread the word of what the embassy is doing on the ground, and also having the opportunity to highlight a Belizean and the incredible work that's being done. I do want to touch base. I go back a little bit on what you were saying in terms of transitions, and one thing that I've seen firsthand is really the Foreign Service officers, and I do want to give a shout out to them because it is so commendable, the work that they do day in and day out. When they're at post, it's 24/7. It's 7 days a week. It's no holidays, no breaks. You're on call. But there are transitions involved, from one post to another post to another post. And I, having done pack out and pack in this one time, you sort of pack up your whole life and you go to a country here in Belize, and then you adapt and you make connections and you network and you continue to further our foreign policy goals here and objectives. And, the safety and health of Americans in this country. And, it's, the responsibilities are high, but then you go to a different post and then they're serving in Pakistan, they're serving in Taiwan, and they're serving. So it's this transition on a continuous trajectory. And you shouldn't be interviewing me. You should be interviewing our Foreign Service officers.
Definitely love to have another one on here. It's, Mentor Talks. We cover this whole span of between people who have international careers that are in the Foreign Service to we've interviewed Jelena Porter, PD Spox. But yeah, no, it'd be great another episode on talk about what it takes, because those pack ups and those transitions, it's a lot. And
yeah, and you go from
too, right, and their pets.
Yeah, and you go from like PD cone to consular to you jump from one to another, and sometimes these are not little steps. They're big leaps to entirely different portfolio and set of responsibilities and skill set too.
It's true. Requires someone who's very flexible and very things all the time.
Right. It's not linear.
No, definitely not linear. But maybe from the sounds of it, it's a lot like the career paths that most of us are facing these days, right? Where it isn't a linear path. Like you said, your parents in the 70s, my parents certainly had very linear paths where they were in the same company.
Right. Yeah. For 20, 30 years, 40 years, and then you retire and then move on. But I think it's important to continuously be nimble. I mean, the way in which we do and engage is very different. I mean, look at us. We've got a MentorTalks here. I just started a podcast, Palm Side Chat. There's ways in which we meet our foreign audience and engage. And if if we are set in stone and we're not growing as individuals or in our careers, then we're really not, we're not growing.
No, I don't think that we are.
Yeah.
And I obviously one way that people could keep their careers interesting is joining the field service.
Right. I
I'm
know.
going to make that plug.
Never a dull moment, I say, in Belize, I'm sure in every post. There's always fires to put out, challenges that arise, and you're hard at work mediating, and day to day it changes and fluctuates, but it is a full-time job. And I alluded to a meme that I found, and it really depicts like what my mom thinks I do, what I think I do, and then what people think diplomats do. I mean, the Netflix show that was out recently with Kerry Russell, the actress, gives you glimpses of some of the realities, some of the, drama, but certainly not really a little bit. It was funny because I watched the first, I think, couple of episodes, and it depicts Kerry Russell suddenly being like appointed as the ambassador, and then she jets off on a private plane, and then she arrives in England at the U.S. Embassy in her residence, and then there's like makeup artists and wardrobe, and I'm like, taxpayer dollars are not going to wardrobe, not going to a private plane, not going to, and there's also a confirmation process. There is, I mean, it is, yes, we do have things that like we are dealing with on a daily basis. It takes nimble and really skilled professional diplomats to be at the task.
Definitely does. And we would not be anywhere without our overseas and in the US doing the work.
In Washington as well.
So I'm also referring to my colleagues here in both, here and abroad.
Right.
Because I think people don't always realize that diplomats actually do serve stateside as well. So we do have that going on. And then about the point with the diplomat, there was actually a really good video, I think, that was done by GPA about.
Oh, really? Oh,
several videos out there debunking what's real.
yes.
Including,
Yeah.
as you said, the makeup and being whisked by a plane and things like
Right.
that. Those are very entertaining as far as the inside look of what it is like to be an ambassador to a country.
Yeah. It's too bad there's never going to be a real, I guess, like a reality show of what we do, because everything is classified, right? Like
Yeah.
but it's as close as it gets, I guess.
I mean, if you could take us, behind the scenes of what it is actually like serving as a U.S. ambassador, as the U.S. ambassador to Belize, what would your typical day look like, and what do you find most important about it?
Yeah, like what I was referring to, day to day varies. But the example of the forest fires and the challenges that we're seeing here on the ground, it varies. For example, this week we had the consular liaison volunteers, and these are Americans being really the extension of the U.S. Embassy, who can help us disseminate information, what's happening, what's the U.S. Embassy is pushing out. So then there's about 10,000 diaspora Americans living in Belize, so making sure that during a crisis that they're informed. And so we had a crisis management workshop, for example. We had fires, forest fires down south. So I'm not leaking out any confidential information, but I did go back and forth with the Prime Minister, for example, in figuring out and connecting with NEMO in addressing these forest fires and what we can be able to do to support. There's a number of things. It's just like on a given day, you catch me and I might be running from to and from. And that's why it took us, Maria, so long to actually make this connection, because something pops up, something happens, and we're, if we end up, being at our desk too long, we're actually not doing our job, because our job is really to engage. So that's number one, is that we're not always behind the desk, sending emails, but although we do, and I can contest because the team is often drafting cables to report back to Washington, which is very necessary, so then everyone can stay informed and abreast with certain issues that are brewing or escalating or being resolved. So it depends, but there's never a dull moment, and it's very exciting and interesting work, and really there's no higher honor than serving our country.
It definitely sounds like it's a varied day-to-day experience, and you're definitely out there doing the public part of public diplomacy. Yeah. So I
The
wanted
last 3 feet, as they say,
yes, the last three.
as Edward Morrow famously said, right? It is how you make those connections that are really immeasurable.
Exactly. Yeah. So I want to turn to the Olympics,
Oh.
since we are doing this in honor of the Olympics, and we're all very, very excited about it happening in Paris this year.
I'm like, well, first of all, our embassy team, we're excited to be watching it from afar. And I have a little bit of FOMO, to be honest, because if I wasn't here, I'd probably find a reason to fly to Paris, practice my French. I'm on certain apps and to continue. I studied French in the 4 years in high school, but I'm hoping that one day I'll be fluent. It's one thing that I admire about Foreign Service officers is that they get to go to FSI, they go to language training. I know it's not all fun and all pretty, but it's remarkable how they are able to acquire languages and have a knack for it. And not only acquire languages, but also to use it in day-to-day once they move to that country. But I'm excited about Paris. I think it's going to be fantastic. I see the friends, the Olympians that I follow, how they're supporting it or how they're getting ready to compete. And so I'm tracking very carefully, and I'm looking forward to many of the sports, i.e. gymnastics and track and all of it pretty much from the opening ceremonies to the closing ceremonies.
We're looking forward to it as well. Yeah.
How lucky is Post in France, though? I'm just saying.
They are very,
what
very
a treat. I mean, I'm sure people are like bidding and they're like, oh, yeah, it's also the Olympics. I should be there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm sure they're very excited and very busy at the same time.
Right.
Yeah. So when you were performing at competing in 1998, you were very close to winning Olympic gold. You performed flawlessly.
I don't know how close, but second, yes.
But ultimately, yes, you won silver. But you handled that moment with so much grace, which is truly extraordinary, and handled it with grace publicly. How did you do that? And what advice do you have for others who are facing feelings of disappointment for not reaching a career goal or a job or anything like that?
Well, that's a very good question. And sportsmanship is important. I think it's something that I heard clearly had to learn the hard way, right? When all cameras, all the microphones, all the journalists were like, so how does it feel to lose? It's like, I mean, and it's immediate, right? The score goes up and it goes boom, boom, boom. And, I think my reaction, of course, was disappointment. I did skate as best as I possibly could. I have no regrets. I slept the necessary hours to get enough rest. I ate and I was, in the best shape possible for a 17-year-old, right? I mean, the weight of the world on your shoulders and, so proud and honored to represent the country. And then it's like, I was favored to win and then all the disappointment. To me, in hindsight, it's looking at and saying like, I literally was like, I did my best. And as my parents would always say to me, you win some, you lose some. And this was definitely like bittersweet because here I was, having all my dreams come true, everything leading up to it, won the nationals. I was going into the Olympic championships, like Olympics prepared, everything was like falling in the right place, but there was just a little thing that was a little off. And that's like, instead of standing on top of the podium, I was no one ever wishes to be second, you know? You kind of wish and dream of being the gold medalist. And it is hard. It is tough. And, you know, when I was answering the questions that the journalists were and the reporters were asking, it's like the one thing I I learned early on was just to be true to myself and to be honest and you know, be yourself. And I was disappointed. I expressed that. And you know, there was no facade of me being like cheery. I was just it was very solemn. And I said my thoughts, and you know, I did say that I didn't lose. I won the silver. You know, of course, it wasn't ideal, but I think disappointment in general. You know, life isn't smooth sailing. You know that you win some and you lose some, and that it's important that if there are things that you can learn from, especially. I mean, my takeaway from those Olympics is yes, I did my best. Yes, I could have had a little bit more charismatic or more, you know, I don't know, at the end of my program, or, you know, I could have landed my triple flip a little bit better, or, but altogether, I'm like, I have no regrets, and I'm okay with it. I'm okay. I sleep well at night. I don't think of this. It does leave a little like ache, like, oh darn, you know, but at the end of the day, it's such a lesson that even if you prepare, even if you're incredibly well prepared and you nail that interview or you do that, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get it, right? Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get that job, or doesn't necessarily mean that whatever you aim for that you'll get. Isn't there a saying that if you like aim for the moon, at least you shoot for it and you land among the stars, right? And I see that, and I feel very fortunate that Olympic experience wasn't my only experience. Had I won, maybe I would have been like, okay, I'm retiring, but it changed the trajectory of I think my athletic career. I went on to win many, many more championships afterwards, went to another Olympic Games, had another shot, you know, and it's that accumulation of those years that really, I look back at my career and I don't think 1998, I think, whoa, like how awesome was it that I won 5 world championships, 9 US titles, like I could not have imagined. And would it have changed if I had won the Olympics and then retired? It sort of made me appreciate instead of that one thing that happens every 4 years, I really appreciate the getting to that point and all the times and all the things involved that happens between those every 4 years between those Olympics.
I guess we all have those what if moments in our lives and our careers.
Right.
Sounds like out of the lessons that you've taken from it, it is about the whole journey.
It is the journey. It really is. Because you can't justify all the 4 years of hard work for that 4-minute long program, 2-minute, 2.5, 6.5-minute program on the ice. Like it doesn't last long enough. So if you don't enjoy the journey, then you're on the wrong path. And I think skating has taught me, especially in terms of following your own, your passion and your heart and paving a new direction. I think that transition was fairly seamless in hindsight, especially in how I transitioned from sports into a different career. But in actuality, it was just one step in front of the other, and that journey that we're talking about that led me to where I am today.
Well, I would love to keep talking, but we're just about out of time. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Ambassador Kwan. And we wanted to say a huge thank you to all of you, our online viewers, for watching. If you're interested in learning more about the awesome exchange alumni like Ambassador Kwan, you can visit our website at alumni.state.gov. Yep. And follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon on our next
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.